Hello, Kids Cook Real Food community. Katie Kimball here for the Healthy Parenting Connector, where we, as always, connect you, parents who just want to raise healthy, independent adults, with the experts who have the information you need. And our expert today might actually not like that word, independent, in my little tagline there. We're going to talk about that. Dr. Deborah MacNamara is our honored guest today. I'm so geeked to talk to her because she actually combines food and parenting. And it's so rare. Thank you for being here, Dr. Deborah.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie.
This is going to be a great conversation, and I don't want to delay it too long, but I do want people to know where you're coming from. So, the official introduction is that Dr. Deborah MacNamara is a scientist, she's an educator, she's a licensed counselor, and she's a mom. And all of that experience kind of crashes together in what she does, which is serving parents to help them understand their kids, to make sense of their kids. She's the author of 3 books: The Sorry Plane, Rest, Play, Grow for parents of preschoolers and people who act like preschoolers, which is just the best phrase ever. And the book we're talking mostly about today is called Nourished. And we're really going to dig into that. Dr. MacNamara is also on the faculty at the Neufeld Institute, which is a great honor. And she's spoken here and there to, like the UN, the Dalai Lama Institute, and here at the Healthy Parenting Connector. As I said, I'm very honored that you are here. So help us understand where you're coming from. What's your background? Like, how did you become so passionate about understanding children and sharing that with the world?
Oh, thank you. And please call me Deborah. And I'm delighted to be here and to be joining your community and to be speaking on obviously my favorite topics right now. How did I get to be here? That's a great question. I didn't plan a linear path. I kept following my passions and my interests. I've always been a developmentalist, meaning that I've always been curious about how things grow and what it is that we need to do to help any living thing achieve their full potential, whether that's being a gardener outside or taking care of my animals or of course my children and the people that I love. And so that's what a developmentalist does. And of course I moved very quickly away from a behavioral tradition. Outcomes, bribes, threats, punishments never made sense to me, and pursued in my studies, my graduate studies, my PhD, basically humanistic or attachment focused work. And then I found Dr. Gordon Neufeld through the Neufeld Institute, who had a relational developmental paradigm in terms of maturation, how we grow up, understanding human emotion, attachment. And it puts it all together. So attachment's not separated from development, emotions aren't separated from play, and it's integrative. And I thought, oh, I can make sense of the world this way. And so I've been working with Gordon and yeah, for the last 17 plus years.
Wow, it's so gratifying to find a style of thinking or philosophy that just resonates, deep within, especially as parents, because we have to do so much by the gut and by intuition, whether we have a degree that fits parenting or not,
Exactly.
really. Deborah, before we talk about nourished and connecting food to attachment, I feel like we need to build kind of some foundations and some definitions. So, in the developmentalist perspective, what are basic needs of kids and teens, and then how do developmentalists maybe view parenting a little different than the mainstream? You touched on that with
Mhm.
bribes and rewards and stuff like that, because that's very much a part of a lot of parenting strategy. How do
Yeah, sure.
developmentalists differ?
Well, I think that's what we've inherited is very much a behavioral viewpoint. And so, as parents, we come into, it's like picking up a middle of, a book and reading in the middle and carrying on. And you realize, oh, okay, yeah, we've been in a behavioral tradition of, you have to teach someone how to grow up, that you have to teach them what to think, teach them how to feel, and that a lot of maturation was taught. If you're a developmentalist, you come at it a bit different, in that you understand that the individual has instincts, emotions, and a blueprint for development inside of us that nature gave us, and that in many ways we're walking alongside nature and whoever and wherever you think that nature comes from. And many people have different spiritual beliefs around that as well, and so we're walking alongside of that. It's like your body knows how to grow taller, it knows how to regulate its heartbeat and blood pressure and things like this. And so of course we're meant to grow as adaptive beings, become more resilient and resourceful. We're meant to grow as separate beings to become our own individual selves, but also be able to be with other people and to be social and to be compassionate and empathic and to be independent. Yes, we want to be independent selves, but yes, also contribute to our community in meaningful ways. And so that's what healthy growth and development would look like. I don't think any parent would probably disagree with that as the goal. I think what is the lens that I bring is probably a little bit different in terms of how we get there. And as a developmentalist, I'm working with what we need to do as midwives to our children's maturation. I believe that the instincts and emotions are there. We know it's there through science. I mean, it's not what I believe. It's there. And so what do we need to do? And we also need to remember culture used to take care of a lot of this information. We've been raising kids for a very long time before there was parenting experts, before there was books. I know it's shocking before there were reels telling us how to deal with temper tantrums and everything else. You know, we were doing that long time. And so it's really an invitation to say, hey, let's just step back a second. What is it that we come with that helps us raise a child? What is it that our children come with that helps them grow? And where do we need to fill in the pieces? Because we don't have culture to guide us so much anymore. And that's okay. Now we have science, and that's wonderful. So you asked another question there, and I don't want to lose it. And that is, what do I focus on? There's four irreducible needs. There is a need to attach, foundational. The number one human need we have, attachment is our survival instinct. What is also important from there is that the other irreducible need that connects with that is rest. Rest in the nervous system to grow, emotional rest, so we can focus, pay attention, learn. We need physical rest, rest to go to sleep. We need rest to digest our food, but also in the context of eating, we're also developing our social and our emotional and connection and attachment. So rest can only happen when there's attachment. That's the second irreducible need. The third irreducible need is emotions. Our emotions need to be taken care of. We need a soft heart. We need to feel safe. We need to be express our heart, not everywhere, not all over the place, and not necessarily to everyone, but there needs to be emotional expression and an understanding of human feelings and vulnerability. And the fourth thing is play. We need play, and play actually helps to take care of emotion. Play actually helps build relationship, puts us into a rest mode. These four irreducible pillars um, define our developmental trajectory.
It feels like the developmentalist tradition really is returning to the roots. It's kind of what I like to do with food. Is if we look 100 years ago, before factories were really involved, what were we eating? What we, like you said, we managed to feed ourselves before commercials for
Yeah,
food process,
exactly.
processed food. We
Exactly.
managed to parent before. I love that Instagram reels telling us what to do. So it's really a return to observing what is natural. One thing you say about food, and this is very much relates to this return, is you say we've become so focused on what food to serve that we've lost sight of how food was meant to serve relationships.
Hmm.
Man, I feel like I could read that 5 times and pull something different every time. Can you unpack
Yeah.
that for us a bit, Deborah? Like, what should food be doing for us, and where and how did we lose our way?
Yeah. It is a synthesis. And so yes, it's meant to capture the essence of it. Well, when I took a step back, I mean, the book starts explaining how I had a very picky eater, picky, and I use that in quotation marks because I have a different understanding of that now. The book starts with understanding my questions as a parent of a picky eater, and then realize what happens when an attachment theorist developmentalist goes into the field of food, nutrition, everything, and says and looks for answers. And then I realize it's disconnected from attachment. My food issue with my daughter was creating an attachment problem, and I was a counselor working with other families around attachment and development, and working with one of the world's leading scholars and researchers and theorists on attachment. And here I was creating an attachment issue over
Parenting is
food.
so darn humbling, isn't it, Deborah?
And I'm
Gosh.
like, oh my goodness, something is broken. Why isn't anyone talking about attachment here? And then when you step away, I think the challenge is, and when I talk to a lot of experts in the field, and they said North America, everybody has some sort of issue with food, whether food phobic, worried about getting fat, not eating well, whatever it might be. All of these shaming, judging, guilt provoking things. So that I tried to write a book that was not shaming or guilt provoking as in many ways. Um, but at the essence of this is when you take a step back, it's much easier to change the food that we are serving in trying to fix a problem. Well, they don't like that, therefore they're not receptive to that food. I'll change the food. It'll look a little bit different. Or they seem, more resistant to the table or whatever it is. We go for the food and to change the food instead of taking a step back and saying, how? What's between us? What relationship would we need in order to have greater receptivity in our child for what we offer? Because at the heart of receptivity is relationship. We're receptive to learning best from teachers that we love and we are attached to. We follow the rules and the values of people that we're attached to. So why would it also not occur to us that we want to eat like, be like, try the same food as, take and be receptive to the people we're most attached to? It's like I stepped back, I thought, what has happened? Have we entered the dark ages? That food has become separated from attachment. It's always been about attachment. It's been attachment to the land, attachment to our ancestors, attachment to our culture, right? Attachment to each other. Food is a vehicle for the expression of attachment in many ways. And so, but it's harder to grasp the how. It's harder to grasp those things because things like love and emotion, they're invisible. Food is not. Food is very visible. And so we focus on the food, not because we're stupid, just because it's really difficult to put your words and consciousness around things like love and emotion. We're not really meant to. And so that's the whole reason for the book, is to try to find some words for something that we need to actually pay attention to now, because it's not about the food. It's
Mm.
not all about the food. It is sometimes, but it's actually about a lot more.
I am so right along with you, and I can't wait to dig into the picky eater topic. But we got to keep building our like stair step foundations here. Um, when you think about food and attachment, like the family dinner table is the
Yeah.
image that immediately comes to mind. I think you and I are on the same page, like shouting from the rooftops together about the importance of family meals. Um, I'm thinking about food a little more probably. Tell me what your research says about family meals.
Yeah, this is such an interesting question, Katie, and I struggled with this one. Of course, we know the family meal is correlated with wonderful positive outcomes. There is no doubt in the research that the family meal is equated to better health, social, emotional, learning outcomes, better trajectories long term for a child as well as the family as a whole. Um, but there's something missing in that equation. And how I came about that was being a counselor and listening to people who would come into my office. Like the tension inside of me was listening to children of alcoholics or children with narcissistic parents or as adults talking about, they're adults now talking about, yeah, the family table was a disaster. Like I would come, dad would be, upset or yelling, or I was forced to eat this. And the table was never a place of rest for me. And then also in my practice working with families, whenever there were relationship problems in the home, then eating became one of the symptoms. Eating problems became one of the symptoms. You could actually track the trajectory. Oh, things were going along fine. And then this started to happen. And I'm like, oh, these two things are dancing together. It's not so simple. You can show up at the table and not be together. You could be eating beside each other, but we are not together. So, what does together mean in terms of relationship? Let's unpack the term together. And what I realized is that it's not eat together, it's actually gather first and then eat. We have to have relationship first, gather in the truest sense, and then we eat as an act of celebration of our togetherness. If we put eat before the togetherness, then it doesn't mean it's going to work well. We have to gather and then eat. And so relationship must come before the food. And then when we eat together, it is going to be the most nourishing. But the table itself doesn't have the secrets. And to the second point to this is that when I dug into the research to try to explain this, what I found was one brilliant study by two sociologists I believe, from Canada, Music, Kelly Musiak. I'm not sure I'm saying the name right. Can't remember the other name of the researcher, but it's in the book. And they basically ruled out all because a lot of the research is correlational. I mean, it's just relationship. We can't determine causality, but they ruled out all these intervening variables, and they found that people who had the most family meals together had one thing in common: had a caretaker who believed family meals were important. So, what does that tell you? It's not about the food, it's about a caretaker in the home who is using whatever they can to orchestrate connection. So, the benefit of the family meal is actually coming from the caretaker who holds the relationships the key. And so, this family meal research has been piggybacking on human attachment, like a caretaker, a provider who basically says, I'm going to use whatever I can to hold on to my loved ones. And so we just have to dig into it a little bit more. We can't just bringing everyone to the table doesn't mean you're together. How do you build relationship first? How do we have those caretakers that call people to the table in the truest sense, in a relational sense? So yeah, it's fascinating. It was fascinating research.
I feel like I've got a bunch of little puzzle pieces in my head, and I think I've got them together. So
Yeah.
let me try to restate all that. We know there's lots of research that says family meals have positive outcomes, but we can't necessarily create those positive outcomes just by saying we shall now eat family meals 5 to 7 days a week.
Got it.
We need the caretaker is not just someone who believes in family meals, but they are in essence they are already the caretaker. They're the mother of the chickies pulling everyone together. The relationships are there first, and then that caretaker luckily happens to also prioritize family meals, and then that creates many of the positive outcomes in kids' lives. And did I put the puzzle pieces together right?
No, you did. You did absolutely. That's exactly it. It's the caretaker's values and beliefs that are bringing people together. And here is the thing that when you say all that and beautifully said, excuse me, is that many people go, well, I can't eat meals 5 to 7 days a week. Is that possible? Well, there's two things that I found. Number one is that 3 meals a week was actually associated with a positive outcome. So bare minimum of three. The other thing that when I dug deeper and deeper into the research, I discovered is it's actually what is it about the caretaker? What are they doing that leads to this positive outcome? It's the invitation for dependence is at the core of this. And you can invite someone to depend upon you, especially around food in many different ways. It's there when if my daughter's at university and she says, I'm stressed out, and I bring her, her favorite latte from the store, I pick it up for her and go have a 5 minute conversation in the car or a 10 minute as she downloads a little bit and she has a latte. I don't have to make that for her necessarily. I don't have to, um, have a long drawn out family meal around it. It's the invitation to depend. The food becomes a symbol of that. You're going away to university, let me make you your favorite muffins to take with you. It's a bridge, it's a connection. We do that when we give someone leftovers, please take this home and enjoy the meal tomorrow. There's so many ways that we can bridge through food. There's so many ways that we invite someone to depend upon us. You get food from the store, you bring it home. Does that mean that's not dependence? Of course it is. Any way that you provide food and say, I want to take care of you, there's an invitation for caretaking. You have at the key, at the heart of it, what those caretakers know, and when they're preserving family meals, that's just how they did it. But we can preserve that. Have a cup of coffee as your kid eats their cereal. Sit down, connect. It's okay. Just make sure food and relationship come together in whatever way that looks like in the context of your family. There's no one prescription here. And that's really important because we've suffered far too long under other people's prescriptions for what it should be like in our home. And it's not Leave It to Beaver. Families are too complex and our life is too different in terms of how we work and how we come together. And so, no, when you dig down into it, the message is really hopeful. Just make sure there's relationship when you come together around food.
Beautiful. Love and connect. And there's a little bit of this. There's some like wafts of this in you'll see like some of the boutique foods in their ingredients list. They'll have blah 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 and salt and love with an exclamation point and a smiley face. And I always think, that's so silly. But in a way, it's that feeling of like if something is made with love or purchased with love and served with love, that's what you're saying is that we're telling people you can count on me to
Yeah,
care for you
you got it.
through food. So, so important. I'm going to step gingerly into a territory that I'm not actually sure where you're going to go on this. So let's see what happens. Here at Kids Cook Real Food, we teach kids to cook. And I have some of my older kids have a meal a week that they have to cook. And I feel like that might be a little bit in opposition with inviting dependence and caretaking as the adult. And I'm just really wondering how you see like kids' role there about, helping, should they be helping feed the family? Should they learn cooking skills?
Yeah.
How do we
This is
know
a great
when
question.
that's right?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I wish I had written more about this actually in the book. Actually, I think I did talk a little bit about it. I love it. I love the idea. I mean, where are we meant to learn how to cook? Where are we meant to learn how to do any of these things? It's passed on through relationships. So, no, it would be the most natural thing to learn your recipes, your flavors, your have the guidance of the people that are you're closest to who introduced you to food. And one of the most beautiful things is when a child, because a child is still in cascading care. This is the most important thing. The child is not being invited to do self-care. The child is being guided by an adult to then learn how to cook. That's great. That's a relationship, and that's a caretaking relationship. And then when the child is cooking for the family, one meal a week, that's an act of service, an act of caretaking. And they're doing it, in relationship to their family members, who that strengthens the bond. And they're doing it in the context of the home where there is cascading care, where you are supporting them in that. So no, I think it's a lovely thing. I think more people in the research actually show that they arrive into adulthood not knowing how to cook, and having to turn to other people to actually teach them, and that becomes more depersonalized. So actually, wouldn't we want to keep this as personal and exclusive as we can? Most of the top chefs, when I went through the research, all had a nona or a grandma or a mother, and oftentimes female, but sometimes there were males that took the responsibility with food. And this was an act of being the same as and sharing what they had been given and passing it on. So, no, I love the idea. I just wouldn't want it to be about self care, about make it for yourself because I'm too busy, because that's not caretaking. That's self-service. That takes it into a different level. It has to be in relationship, and that can look like a lot of things.
Interesting. Well, I was a little nervous because it feels like giving a child, a meal a week is very much like pushing into independence. I do have my kids make their own lunches, pack their own lunches. But one thing I always
Yes.
tell our community is, when you give kids a responsibility, it allows them to then receive a gift from you when they're stressed and you can say, "Hey, honey, I'll make your lunch for you tomorrow."
Yeah.
Because it's not an everyday thing. Whereas kids, for whom you're making their lunch all the time, it's just an expectation. And I guess I don't know where that falls exactly on the balance beam of dependence and independence. I hope it's in the middle.
Well, I think it's a great question. And I think the reality is, and this is where we get into trouble with prescriptions. Like, I work with diverse families, and it is the greatest disservice to try to have blanket rules to match all families' needs. Would you ever say to a single mom, you gotta make breakfast, make lunch, and then get dinner on the table? Like, come on. Of course, the kids help out and they do more work around the house, as oftentimes as a result in single parent families, and also in families that have, both adults are working. What's the most important thing? Find a place and time of the day if you can to invite dependence. I got your favorite meal. I got your favorite foods to make your lunch with. That's dependence.
Mm.
Do you need some help? Heating that up to put it in a container to take to school. That's dependence. Did you remember your water bottle? That's dependence. Like it doesn't have to come in a pretty little gorgeous bento box. Whoever could do that, I'm just like, oh, I could, I could never do it. But I'm like, will you feed me? Like, but like, just think about it. We're just trying to say, am I taking care of you? Am I
Mhm.
taking care of you? And, we all have different resources. So just, from someone who's working in the, like, military, who's out on a boat 6 months for the year, they've left their, food they in the freezer, and take out a muffin that I made for you and I put in the freezer, and some meals that I made. Like, come on, that's an act of love,
Mhm.
but yes, you might have to make your own sandwich. That might be it. But, are you able to come together around food, and try to find times and have rituals for that? during a week, during your seasons, whatever that might be. So you won't find any prescriptions for me here. The only caveat is, and you're getting to the essence of it, Katie, is this idea that, just take care of your food. Oh, why do I have to do this again? Oh my gosh, you got to eat. You're hungry again. It's just this sense of, oh, our hands go up and I don't know what to do with you. You eat so much. I don't want to take care of this. This is drudgery. And just this lack of invitation, this lack of warmth, this lack of caring. Okay, I can't make your meals, but I'm going to help figure out how we can get lunches made. Okay. Like that, there's a different sense, there's a different caretaking sense. There just has to be some care, not this,
And
oh, although we
yeah,
will do that sometimes. Just hide it.
I was going to say that's a very realistic perspective of many parents and even myself. It just depends on the day, right? Sometimes I love cooking. Sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I have to make dinner again. So it's very nuanced. Are we teaching our kids to cook just so that they can feed themselves as
Exactly.
adults or as 14 or 12-year olds? Or are we teaching them to cook so that they can be in community? It's a
Yes.
small difference, but I do think it's an important one. One thing we always do is thank the cook, right?
Yeah.
So there's very much of a relationship there, like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. And then that cook never has to do any after meal cleanup chores. So
Yeah.
the rest of us are then supporting in the meal. So you're right. It's not about being a prescription. It's about, is there relationship? Is there giving and receiving and the majority of caretaking coming from the parent, but it doesn't have to be all of it. We can teach our kids to take care of each other, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. No, it's beautiful. And that is it. It's reciprocal. There's a giving and a receiving, and there's that beautiful dance. There's invitation in us, there's receptivity in them. They could take care of younger brothers and sisters. They can feed the dog. They can feel like I'm feeding my family. Like I've been helped to make a meal for my family. My kids are so proud. They actually, for Mother's Day this year, the gift was, I'm gonna make you dinner, Mom. Couldn't have had a better thing. That she put too much pepper in the jambalaya she made, my daughter did. And it's interesting, and as the research shows, that if food is made with care and love, the intentions of the chef change the nature of your taste. And so I said, you know what? I usually don't like a lot of pepper, but this is really tasting good to me. And it was so shocking to me because it was made with such a beautiful act of love on Mother's Day. Like, and she had put in too much pepper, but I thought, I kind of like it. It's different
Mm.
because love changes everything. It changes your taste. It changes how you see the world. It blinds you sometimes. So, yeah, no,
Mm.
it's so critical.
So interesting. We
Yeah.
my oldest kids are 18 and having a gap year, so an adult still here in the home, and then 15 and 12 also. Actually, all three of them now have one meal per week. And my poor 15-year-old happens to be a girl. School's hard. We're recording this about 4 weeks into the school year, and so it was her dinner on a Friday. We had to get the meal on the table so fast for the homecoming parade, and people needed to get out of the house, and she just had a bad day at school, and she's starting to scrub potatoes. And I look and I just see a tear running down her face.
Mm.
I said, honey, can I scrub those potatoes for you? That just feels like this is too much for you today. And that's okay. She was really resistant to getting help. I said, honey, we're ordering Chinese. Like, you get a day off. And she wanted to know if she'd have to make her meal the next night. I said, no, everybody gets a buy sometimes. Like, this is just a day we're going to order Chinese and it'll be fine. And so I think that's exactly, not a prescription, right?
Mhm.
It's not a forcing, but it's that back and forth. We give our kids what they need. Sometimes they don't want to make the meal,
Mhm.
but we can remind them that this is what we do in a household and in a relationship, right? um Chinese versus what she was going to make. Chinese probably not as healthy for our vitamins and our minerals, but much healthier for our spirits. And we spend a lot of time figuring out the food, right? What are we going to eat? What's healthy, what's not? Where are we going to grocery shop? How do we save money? Like, so much time and mental energy. Deborah, for a lot of parents I work with the picky eating, there's so much worry, that mental
Yeah.
energy about the picky eating. What would change if we took some of that time and spent it on relationships instead?
Oh, well, first of all, I think we'd be less tormented, because relationship is part of our innate instincts and emotions to focus on. I mean, that keeps us up at night. That drives our distraction at work if our relationships are in threat. So this is home for us, is focusing on connection. And sometimes we just don't see the connection that we want. So we can work at that. the picky eating, we need to understand, especially in young kids, is very much part of their development, in the sense that um, by the time 2 to 3 rolls around, they have much more autonomy. At least they should. You start to hear them say things like, "I do it myself," "Me do." You see this, "I want," "I like," and it's like this little person has finally come alive. You call me my name. You don't call me my nickname. You call me Mason. You call me, don't call me your honey. You just see this child, like psychologically, there's enough of development by the age of 3, if everything's unfolding well, that they really become their own little self. So you put their favorite meals down, or you put new things down, and they're like, "What's that? I don't know that." They get this shyness response, which is actually part of attachment instincts, is to be shy to the things that you're not introduced to or attached to, that are part of your relationship system. So, a stranger tries to feed you food, it doesn't feel natural to eat that food unless you're not connected. Typically, you're not connected back at the ranch. Um, uh, if you go to preschools and they're attached to each other, and they're attached to the preschool teacher or daycare provider, they'll eat the food. They'll never touch a lentil at home, but they eat lentils for their daycare provider, because that's what everybody eats there, because it's about attachment and it's about connectivity. And so they're receptive in the context of attachment to the food that the people that they're attached to are eating. You like blueberries? Maybe I'll try blueberry. You like bacon? Oh, maybe I'll try bacon too. And if they have food around them at this age, when they become not simply just fed, but become an eater, they feel they have some autonomy, they're connected to people that they're with, they see that these people like that food, they're more interested, they get to choose. Children should, they're figuring out their palate, they're figuring out their satiety responses. And if we override those things, we're in trouble. And so we're introducing food in the context of connection. There's no traditional cultures that have a concept of picky eating. Like, it's interesting. Like, when I did this study, I was reading about the study in Mexico that a researcher by the name of Paul Rosen did, and he said, "What is it? How do, like, children by 5 or 6 years of age, why are they eating such hot peppers and spice? Like, nobody likes that at the beginning. Like, nobody. The 2-year old is avoidant to it. They do not like it. But by 5, they're eating the same spicy meals as everybody else." And so he looked at it and he says, "We don't know how this happens." Him as a researcher says, "I don't know how this happens, but I do know it unfolds when they're eating with the people that they're attached to at the family table, and watching what they're eating." So from 2 to 5, they have this, they're introduced. It's like, you say to your child, sharing is caring. Well, 3-year-old gets the message. By 5 or 6, we're hoping they're implementing it. It's the same with food, right? So we got to slow down. It's an introduction. It needs to feel emotionally safe. You need to be connected to the people who are leading you. You're not going to learn or want to taste anything in a hostile environment where you're forced to. It's contrived. There's bribes, threats, punishments. You lose your appetite. So picky eating actually can resolve itself with healthy development, with good relationships, and a safe emotional environment to eat in. If it's protracted, if it gets dug in, then we need to look and say, what's happening here? My daughter had a temperament, a sensitivity temperament. Her chemical sensing system, her nose, her palate, her gut, it's highly active, it's supercharged. And so I had to deal with that. So I had to go a lot slower. I didn't understand that, but I was working with an issue in her body, as many parents also have kids where they're working with something in a child's body: allergies, hypersensitivity, autism and things like this, where it just makes it a little bit more challenging to bring into something new. But is there a way? Yes, there is. But it's not just about the food. It's about the context, who feeds you, and how we're doing it, and how they're all paired together. So picky eating is pathologized. It shouldn't be. It's a natural part of development. When it gets stuck is when we should be concerned. And then we go back to look at not just the food, but what's going on. The child could be being bullied at home, coming home and just having a stress response around food. It might have nothing to do with the home. It might be what's happening externally. But all the time we're looking at the food, we never ask the 100 questions we need to ask.
What's wild is there is some research that shows that parenting styles and even parent levels of depression or socioeconomic status, like basically anything about the parent, doesn't begin or doesn't cause picky eating. And I've always felt to me a disconnect. I'm like, I see the research, I see it in print, but man, I'm just not quite sure I buy into it. But I suppose all those things would be set aside as long as there's still that attachment relationship. I think that's what you're saying.
The attachment is a vehicle through the problem.
Mm.
It's a vehicle through it. Yeah, parents, we overrate ourselves. We don't cause everything. And all the time that we blame ourselves, I mean, yes, we are to blame for lots of stuff, don't get me wrong, but all the time it's like, oh, it's the parents' fault, which is always happened around the food issue. It's always the parents' fault. It's like, no, you don't understand the complexity of this. And yet at the same time, in offering that as a response, you take out the people who are most responsible, who are likely to have the best relationship. And if not, we need to work on that relationship
Mm.
to help find their way through with their kid. No, parents are the best bet when we can focus on relationship. And yeah, my daughter, her sensitivity and her temperament, I needed to focus on connection and safe, caring environment to eat in. And I can tell you, in today's world, and just going into gatherings, when your child isn't eating properly, or the shaming and the judgment, and what do you mean they don't like that? And oh, and they don't eat meat, or they don't, it's just like, stop it. Just stop judging my journey as a parent or judging what I'm doing. You have no idea. And every time you have those kind of comments, you make matters worse for my daughter and create a hostile environment for her to eat in. And so I heard that over and over again from lots of parents. And so we need to support our parents. They're, finding a way through with whatever their child is struggling with, and they need to some help in terms of figuring out how to do that. So yeah, anyway, it's just I could go on more about that, but food is it's much of a
Mm.
landmine. There's landmines everywhere, shame, judgment, guilt. It's so unfortunate. It should bring us pleasure. It's like, how did we get here that our food and how we eat is harming us now? It's just baffling.
Right. That's one of my greatest joys working with parents of picky eaters is I say our goal is not to see a new food pass your kid's lips. If that happens, great, cool. But the goal is to bring down the stress level at the table
You got it.
for the parents specifically, and then the children will follow, right? Because we're
Exactly.
connected. And you mentioned one situation that I hear ridiculously often, and that is a child who eats something at usually preschool or daycare, sometimes elementary age kids at school, and then won't touch it at home. Yeah, it's so common. You touched on the attachment with, we call it peer pressure, but I can see that it's not exactly like positive peer pressure. It's peer attachment and sort of that feel of like everyone's eating it, so I can too,
Yes.
because the kid loves and is attached to his peers or her peers and the teacher. Um, what should a parent do of a 3-year-old who eats lentils at school, won't touch them at home? Is there, I don't prescribe, of course, but tell them what to do.
Well, personally, not necessarily professionally, personally, if my child was eating lentils anywhere, I'd be overjoyed. I mean, I'd be overjoyed. I'd be full of joy, right? Because yay, they're getting lentils into their diet. Fantastic. What would I do? I would step back and say the answer to this question is, you might not like, we're always feeding from a place of our roots as well, and our family and our culture. And so I think that we need to say it's okay that we have different foods in our home and maybe in different contexts. Like, I'm not, unless lentils is your thing, we're not, I didn't grow up with lentils. My food history is different. And so potatoes, any which way, to the moon, I can cook potatoes, many different forms of potatoes. So, that would be more our food culture. So it's okay to have differences. But remember, the reason that they're able to eat the lentils is because of connection. They feel safe, they feel connected, and they want to eat like the people they feel safe and connected to. So whatever food you want to have in the home that you choose is your family diet, then remember just to embed it in strong, caring, safe attachments. Like, our family loves butter chicken. My very sensitive, picky palate eater did not, it was offensive to her smell system, but she watched us loving it and eating it, and I made like a little side meal for her, like same food but a little bit different. And so we all ate the same thing, but she over time just said, oh, maybe I'll try a little bit. But she was learning about it through watching us, she enjoying it. We never forced it. It was like, oh, this is my favorite meal. And eventually she just tasted a little bit. Oh, it's actually not so bad. She felt okay. And then she tasted a little bit more. Now it's one of her favorite meals. So just be patient, go slow, decide what meals and food you want to introduce, and then serve it in the context of safe, caring relationships, and just be patient until it takes or doesn't. They might decide it's not their taste. That's okay too.
I love that you pointed out the going slow because that's definitely something I tell parents too. Like, this will take time.
Yeah,
Your kids have to kind of believe you that you're no longer going to require bites or put bites, contingent upon dessert, etc. They've got maybe some habits that aren't serving the family. It takes time to unravel. And
exactly.
and you're right, relationships take time too. And I think that's such a beautiful vision. I call it team one meal. That even if what you're eating looks a little different, it's still sort of the same meal. And I'm so glad that you said that you would make chicken slightly less seasoned as opposed to chicken nuggets out of the freezer, mac and cheese, right? Like a totally separate meal. Cause I think making separate meals can interfere with the feel of the relationship. Personally, I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting point. I often just thought if there's going to be togetherness around food, there has to be some sameness and commonality. And the research did show that, when you put food on the table or when you have different food on the table, the family eats the same food, but people all have a stronger preference for their particular things. Like someone really likes the ketchup, someone really likes the potatoes, someone really likes the edamame or whatever it is, and someone really likes lots of sauce. You're all eating the same thing, but we have an invitation for our own palate and satiety responses and stuff like that. And so my daughter actually, I started serving edamame, rice, and butter chicken because I thought she needs to have protein with the edamame, with the rice. But I didn't tell her that. I just did that. So she would eat her edamame and her rice and some other vegetable, and we all started eating edamame, which is typically Japanese, with butter chicken. But that's our meal for butter chicken. Is we still all have it together because it was an extra protein source for her, but we all just adopted it because the research shows if you are eating something separate and you're saying, "Oh, that's really good. I made that for you," but you're eating something different, there's no connection. They're like, well, why? We're not the same in terms of our food. Sameness is an attachment, is a form of attachment. It's not modeling, it's sameness. We are the same. We have the same name. We have the same eye color. We have the same whatever. It's more superficial, but sameness is a way of belonging and of connection. And so
Mhm.
when you eat the same food, it brings you into connection. When you have challenges, like allergies and life-threatening things, one of the things people will tell you is there's a sense of disconnect. We have to bring our own food to gatherings. My kid can't have the birthday cake. And there's a sense of, it's not just they can't eat the food, there's a sense of disconnect. They're not part of with the group. So that's the way that I always looked at it is, okay, yes, who have I got around my table? How am I going to make sure there is invitation and inclusion without this sense of I'm, making you separate meals and oh my gosh, nothing comes together. To me, that isn't togetherness, right?
This is so encouraging to me because it really is. It's what I teach parents, just with a little different, like, philosophical spin, but the end result's kind of the same. Like, we need to have
Yes.
family unity and eat the same meals. And boy, I mean, I've got a daughter who's dairy free. Her spirits can plummet when she's at an event and pizza is the choice,
Yes.
right? It's just awful to feel excluded. And it does feel like it's a food thing, but I think you're hitting the nail on the head clearly, that it's a relationship thing. When you're eating together, be eating separate food is just, it's like how do we speak without speaking, right? It's saying we are different. And gosh, it's just so powerful. I do think all families can figure that out. A lot of parents have shared with me lately, like, I have to be on a special diet medically, so I can't eat the same food as my kids. And I'm like, but maybe there's a solution. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you don't have to be completely separate. And a lot of parents also share with me that they have this extreme guilt or maybe an inadequacy. They feel like they personally have a poor relationship with food, or they know that the
Mm.
way they approach food is kind of disordered. So they feel like, oh my goodness, I don't want to pass this on to my kids. Like, I
Yes.
can't model a healthy relationship with food at the table. And it's such, oh my goodness, it's just such a stressor for them. So what do you tell people about our feelings about food, especially if they're so negative sometimes?
Yeah, I heard that a lot in my research as
Mm.
well. Um, And of course, wanting to be a good provider, wanting to help your children have a healthy relationship with food and with you. I don't think there's anyone who can say that they don't have some sort of challenges with a relationship with food in North American culture. We've fallen far, far, far off the wagon. So it is a struggle I think everyone will share. What I did see and what I have found and what I do know through science and personally is that we come with innate instincts and emotions to take the lead to provide. And when we do that, it's a very interesting thing that happens to our emotional system. When you're in that providing stance and you see yourself as responsible, your emotions tend to get pushed to the side, not permanently, but just to the side while your focus is on taking care of somebody. What do they need from me? What is most critical for their well-being right now? How do I want to show up for them? It's that tension inside of you and saying, I don't want my kids to have this. That actually is the answer. It's not the problem. It actually is the answer because you're in conflict with what your experience has been and how you want to show up for a child. It's that internal conflict that creates the answer for you because you sit in the middle of the tension. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I do have to shield my child from that. No, there will be no fat talk, shaming talk. Everybody is loved at our table kind of conversation. We challenge our views, we challenge our expectations, we challenge culture and body image issues or whatever it is that we're doing. We are pushing back against that, say, no, not on my watch. And that internal tension is the answer. It's not the problem. And so we think it's the problem because we feel conflict around it. No, it's your provider instincts and emotions saying, not on my watch. Pay attention. Pay attention because there's a slippery slope here. If you fall into unconsciousness here, you're going to replicate what happened to you. So your brain and your alarm system is going, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. It's like when your child has a cold and can't breathe at night. I don't know about you, but I don't sleep very well. I'm like, yeah, they're still breathing, and especially when they were little, I would be much more hypervigilant through the night. I'd have to be conscious. My alarm system was on. And so we are going to have a heightened level of alarm around food if food was challenging for us. But I can tell you that internal conflict is not a problem in you. It's the way that you're going to mature and find a way through it to become the provider your child needs. Food was not easy for you. That's okay. You can find a way through. You can adapt. That is the hardwiring inside of us
Mm.
that behaviorists don't get. We are born to be able to be adaptive, to be full of conflict, to wrestle with our instincts and our emotions, to come up with a different way of being, to learn, and to be better than what we got in
Wow.
terms of, our parents did the best they had. Now we're going to do the best that we can and
Yes,
give our children a new future.
for sure. I always say when we know better, we can do better. And gosh, what you said, Deborah, is so powerful. It's so encouraging for parents. For a while, my brain was having trouble. I was like, it's not the problem, it's the answer. Like it took my little
Yeah.
neural pathways a minute to get on the train with you, but now I completely am there. I understand. You're saying basically the fact that we care, the fact that we've identified that this could be a problem is exactly what we need. It's like I need to compliment those parents, like, yes, great, this is hard, that means it's good. Right, this is hard, that means
Yes.
you'll figure it out.
Yeah. And if you go into this, if you go back into the science, what you see, and even what our philosophers talked about, if you go right back into philosophy, they said all human growth comes from internal conflict. And that internal conflict is our emotions that come together, where one side of us wants to do something, the other side wants to do another thing. Our thoughts take us in different directions. And when you sit in the middle of the conflict, when it's not simply yes or no, up or down, where's the rules, where's the fix, where's the manual, when you sit in the conflict of how you want to show up for your child and what's inside of you, that's where you grow more confident, you grow more wise, you find your answers. And that's why you can't find those answers on Instagram reels. You've got to go internal. I mean, I'm not saying they can't help, they can help, but I'm just saying you've got to sit with it. You've got to sit in the conflict that it creates and find your answer so that when you show up for your children, they see
Mm.
you who's been put together in a new way because of that conflict inside of you.
I'm so happy to be countercultural. Nearly everything I do I feel like I'm walking upstream, right? Pushing against
Yes,
the current. And this is one of those things like we in North America,
absolutely.
we don't like conflict. We don't like pain. If it's hard, there's got to
Mhm.
be a quicker answer. And we just haven't
Got it.
found it yet, doggone it. Right. And
Yeah,
what you're
exact
saying
well
is,
said.
oh, like
Exactly.
sit in the conflict. It parenting is not an easy button. There is no easy button for parenting. And if there was, it would be wrong. It would be the red one that goes, like, don't hit the easy
Right.
button on parenting. There's no such thing.
And the benefit of that and the beauty of that, if you really get that like you do, the beauty of that is that the parent that shows up today for a child that has faced that, integrated that, figured it out, that parent is that much more confident
Mm,
for the next challenge that will come, and then the next challenge and the next challenge. And as our kids go through life, we realize it's better to have been growing this way
mm,
and to face what comes than to be blown over by every storm that comes. We have to stick our landing. We got to find our way through these storms because they make us more resilient and resourceful for the storms that will lie ahead. It's, who is it? John Muir, the environmentalist, said, when you pull on a thread, you find that it's connected to everything else in the universe. And it's not so simple as just getting food into our kids. Food isn't simply fuel. It's connected to who we are, how we grow, like emotionally. It's
mm.
connected to our children and their growth, social, emotional, physical. It's not simply just about, oh, they had chicken nuggets today again. It's connected to everything to do with it, growth and well-being, and truly being nourished. So it's such a beautiful area to enter into and look at parenting. We think it's about food, and people said this book isn't about food, is it's about parenting. Yeah, it is actually.
Well, I have 5 million more questions I could ask you, but we probably shouldn't have a 2-hour interview, just, for the sake of people actually seeing the timestamp and listening to it.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
we shall see, if we meet again, perhaps. But I love to end my interviews by asking, can you share a message of hope with our community? But I feel like you just did that, this whole sitting in the
Yeah.
conflict conversation. So I'm just going to ask you if there's anything else you want our listeners to know in particular about Nourished, which everyone is now going to go buy because it's the perfect intersection of food and parenting. It's what we all love here at Kins Cook Real Food. But are there any sort of last words that you want to let us sit with in our hearts?
Yeah, no, I go back. Thank you for that invitation. I go back over and over again as a parent. It's funny, how your words come back to help you as a parent. And whenever I'm full of thought or conflict or don't know what to return to or find my grounding on, I come back to one of the opening poems that I have in the book, which I just thought I found it. I'm like, oh, I just love it. It's by a lady by the name of Tara Moore, Mohr. And I think she's a coach that teaches people how to do coaching and stuff. But I found it on her website one day. It's a poem about just being and being in the storm. And it's something like, return to chop, don't try to sculpt a perfect life. Go back and simply chop vegetables and make a still lake inside of you. When your loved ones need something, they can come and find that rest in you. And it's obviously, I'm paraphrasing it, but that idea of just simply going back to chop vegetables, like I can do that when I'm most stressed. I can chop vegetables, I can make a soup. And it's sort of like this contemplative, meditative practice, which brings me back into my caregiving instincts, brings me back into myself. It doesn't have to be fancy, but I find myself, if I just return to something simple that is an act of caretaking, it returns me back to the caretaker that I want to be. And so I think food's a beautiful way to orchestrate our relationships, not only to our kids, but to ourselves as a provider. So I would offer that to everybody today.
Absolutely beautiful. Parents, let us truly tuck this into our hearts, right? That we need to return to our home base of being a caretaker, right? Of taking care of our kids, whatever that looks like. If it's picking up the phone to order takeout, or if it's chopping those vegetables, or if it's chopping the vegetables next to your children, right? There are so many ways to do that, to give care and to provide. And food is always about relationships first and what we
Yes.
see with our eyeballs and taste with our mouths second. Ugh, so
Beautiful.
powerful. Thank you so very much, Dr. Deborah MacNamara. Deborah's got a couple infographics for you. They're not Instagram reels, but they're about
Not that there's anything wrong with those.
no, they're about picky eating and gathering to eat. So if you like that idea of like a short encapsulation, anywhere we share this video and interview, we will share the links to those. I encourage you to chase Deborah around the web, check out all three of her books, see which ones speak to you the most. Nourished Well, of course, but you might need a couple of them. And I just feel so blessed and honored to have had this conversation. I feel like we could sit down over coffee for hours. It would be lovely.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Yes, I really enjoyed our interview and your insights and your experience working with families. So thank you very much for the invitation to be with you.
Oh, what a blessing. This is just going to be such a help for so many. Friends, I am Katie Kimball for the Healthy Parenting Connector, drawing together the wisdom of many experts like Dr. Deborah MacNamara, and I will see you next week for another episode. Thank you so much.